Hello and welcome to Little Stitches with Miss Mary. Today we are making yarn flowers, and in your kit you could either make bookmarks so they look like this, or I'll also show you can attach them to a keychain and have them just as a keychain. So that will be up to you. Alright, if you picked up a kit from the library, inside it you will find 3 green yarn strands, 3 different color long yarn strands, a fork, a plastic sewing needle, a keychain, and multiple heart-shaped beads. If you were able to pick up a kit from the library, you will still need a pair of scissors. If you weren't able to pick up a kit from the library, these are some items you'll need and you can follow along as well. Alright, to get started, we are working on our bookmark flower, or like I said, you can make it into a keychain. So first you're going to gather one of the color yarn strands and have one of your green strands ready. Then you're going to need that fork and your plastic needle and your scissors. So first we're going to start by making the flower using the fork and our first color, and then I'll show you how to add the green while we're making that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take our color yarn that we're going to start with. And why don't we measure from one end of our fork to the other and take those scissors, and we're just going to cut that, and we're going to save that piece off to the side. Next we're going to grab our fork and go over the fork this way. So I'm going to hold this end and I'm just going to wrap it around and around. And you could keep wrapping it until you're all out, or you could go 20 times. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that's about 20. And I still have a good amount of string left, so if you want to try and see what your flower looks like more full, you can go over it a couple more times. You can go over it using all of it, or if you like what that looks like, you could stop there. So when I stop there, the next thing I'm going to do is grab my needle, and I'm going to put that same color that we cut off through. Okay, so for this, we want to make sure it's around all of the yarn. So I'm not trying to go through the middle, which is what we're going to do with the green. I actually want to make sure this wraps around the whole outside. So I'm going to bring, so whichever side my yarn is facing that I started with, this is facing up. So this is going to be the bottom of my flower. So I'm going to take my string that's the same color, and I'm going to push it up through the fork, just the last one. And try not to lose all your string off the outside. But if you do, just rewrap it. It's okay. Okay? So I went up through there. And the next thing I'm going to do is just flip it over. So I could grab this string, and you could pull the rest out. And you could pull it off the needle at this point. And then I'm going to wrap it so it's all over the last little spike of the fork. And make sure these don't fall out. Okay, so if you could see that, I've wrapped it 20 or more times. I've wrapped the piece of string that I cut. See how it's around the bottom here and over the top here. Before I tie that though, I'm going to grab my green string and put that through the needle And this time we're going through the middle of where we wrapped. So I'm going to use that last little spike again on the fork and bring that all the way through to the other side. Perfect. So I'm going to hold it like this so it doesn't get too confusing. So I've got the long colored string wrapped around 20 times of the whole fork. Then I took the piece that we cut off and put it through the last little spike of the fork around the top and the bottom. Then I took my needle and put the green thread right through that bottom spike again, but through the center of that. So then it wraps toward the bottom. So before I do anything else, I'm going to take that colored string that I had that's around the string that we wrapped around the fork, and I'm going to tie a knot. I'm going to tie it nice and tight, really tight, and I'm going to knot it at, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, nice and tight, maybe even more if you want to make sure it's nice and secure. Perfect. Now at this point, if it slips off the fork, that's okay, just keep going. I'm going to leave mine on as long as I can just because I'm going to tie it this next part and then we'll be taking it off. But if it fell off, that's okay. So at this point, you're going to figure out, so this green string is pretty long. You could pull some of it through. If you know for sure you want a bookmark, make sure this one strand stays pretty long because you want to make sure it goes the full length of your book and it's not too short. See how nice and long these are? But if we want to make little petals or if we want to make little leaves at the top, you're going to need some extra string up there that we tie it to. So that's why I've pulled this through, so I have a good amount, but my long strand on the other side is still pretty long. So that looks like a good amount. I'm going to take this and I'm going to tie it to the bottom part of this flower right there. And then you could pull it off. And then I'm going to do 2 or 3 more knots. Just like that. Then I'm going to come through and cut all of my extra string so it's the same length. And you can move those all off to the side. And then I'm going to take my scissors and go right down the middle. Before I start cutting, if you like your flower looking like this, you can keep it like that. But if you want it to open up and have it more fluffy, then we're going to take our scissors and go down through the middle and just cut right down the middle, all of that open. And you'll have a nice open flower. Again, you could take your scissors and clean up some of the yarn if some parts are a little too long. All right. Next, you're going to take the string that we kept really long, and the one that's pretty long but shorter than the other one is the one I'm going to make a couple more knots. So I'm going to make a couple of knots just straight on that long yarn. And then I'm going to make my little leaf. I'm going to loop it so it's the shape I want. I'm going to go around that the long yarn. And then with that loop I just had, I'm going to pull it nice and tight. And tie it like that. So I'm really just making a loop and then pulling it tight so there's no extra. So I'm going to do it again, but I don't want it right next to the other one, so I'm going to do maybe 2 knots. And then I'm going to do another little leaf. So I'm going to make the loop. With the loop, I'm going to go around the top of the long yarn, through the middle, and then pull that nice and tight and just watch that little end there. And then just pull it nice and tight. And you might have to go back and forth, pulling each string a little bit here and there just to get it, the leaf, the shape you want, and make sure it's nice and tight. And once that's done, if you have a little more string, you could tie it at least once or twice more. Mine's getting pretty short, so I'm going to try to at least tie it twice. And then I'm going to cut that off. Perfect. So with that, this is when you're going to decide if you want to just attach it to the keychain. So if you're going to do that, you can make all 3 of your flowers first. That way you could see how long you want the stem to be, or if you want them to all be the same height, or stagger them. So I'm going to do 1 long, 1 medium, and 1 shorter. And that way when they're on the keychain, you can see them all separately. You could still use the beads and put a couple beads on each one, and then just tie it to that keychain. Now if you want to make the bookmark like these examples, what I'm going to do next is take the end of that long yarn and again thread it through the needle, and then you're going to pick which of the beads you want to use. You could separate them out so you make sure you have enough for each one, or they could all have the same amount, or one can have 1 and one can have 5 beads. It's really up to you. So I'm going to put 3 on this one. So I'm just going to push it right through and then just put all 3 on here. Once those are through, then you could take the needle off. I'm going to line up how long I want my bookmark. And if there's a favorite book or a book you think you want to use it for, you could test it out. Make sure it's long enough. So from there, I'm just going to make a bunch of knots, because if I make a couple knots right on top of each other, so if I have a knot there, I'm going to do another knot, and I'm going to try to make it right on top of that other one, and I'm going to do it a couple more times. That way, the knot we make here is too big for the beads to slip out. So you could test it, pull it, and if your beads don't fall out, that's good. Or you could even do 1 more. Then way you know for sure they can't fit that way. Pull it nice and tight, and then you can cut that. And then you got your bookmark. Again, if you're doing the keychain, you might want to make all 3 first, and then you could see how long you want the stems to be before you start cutting anything. But yeah, so that's how we make our bookmark flower. You'll do the same exact steps to make all 3. Measure your length of the fork. Then cut that. Set that off to the side. You're going to take your string and you're going to go around it. If you liked your other flower, you could do it the same amount. I think I did about 25. If you did the whole thing, you could do that again. Then we took the needle and thread it the same color first. Then we're going to just, sometimes you have to just scooch the yarn down a little bit so this fits, but don't push it all the way off. So I'm going to push it through that right in between the last little spike on the fork. See, I pushed it too far, so I just have to push that back in there. Okay, so once you're through there, you don't have to do anything yet. Remember, the same color yarn just goes through that and around the back. So we want to see it the whole way around. But we'll take our next green. We're gonna thread that. And remember, this one goes through the middle of our yarn. Once you have that through the middle, so you don't want to be able to see it all the way through, then we're going to tie the one that's the same color. And that's what's holding it all together. So that's why we want it all the way around the top and all the way around the back. Nice and tight. Tie that a couple times. Then you can pull it off the fork. And with your green yarn, you can pull it through however much you want. Make sure you leave enough if you want to make that bookmark. And then you're just going to make a good knot right at the bottom. Nice and tight. Next, we push up all of our loose ends. That way we can cut it so it's all the same length. Get those extras out of the way. And then cut down the middle through the loops, just like that. Again, you can shape the flower a little bit too, so if some are too long. And then this is where it depends on if you're making a bookmark or a keychain, but I'm still going to tie this a couple more times. Okay, and then to make our leaves, and if you don't like the leaves, you don't have to do this part either. That's up to the design of your flowers. But I made a loop. I went around the top of the long yarn and then back through the middle. And then pulled that nice and tight. Then I'm going to do a couple more knots. Then I'm going to take that shorter green yarn to make the other leaf. Just like that. Pull it nice and tight. And then again, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 more knots just to finish it off. And then you can cut that extra. Great. All right, so now you've seen it twice. This is the point where you're going to figure out if you're going to add the beads to the bottom to do the bookmark, or if you're going to attach them together to make the keychain. And you have enough to make one more. If you need help and want to watch it again, you could always start the video over to watch how to do your last one. And I hope you enjoy your bookmark or your keychain, and that you've had fun with us making yarn flowers. And until next time, goodbye.